Candy walked her back to the house, and she asked the boys to keep an eye on her, and that's the last time I seen her.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to deal with Summer Wells's grandmother recalling the day that she went missing. In a weird way, this should really be breaking news. I'm not quite sure why it's not the case. Perhaps it's because of certain other events taking over world news, but there was a very long time where we were all waiting to hear from Grandma. And 8 months after the fact, she's eventually spoken a little bit about what she experienced when her granddaughter disappeared. So the first thing to note with Grandma's interview is the timing of it. When does Grandma speak on camera to the media for the first time about her missing granddaughter? Well, 8 months after the fact. Everyone else has spoken, so why not Grandma? What or who is she afraid of? Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So the major change between the summer of 2021 when Summer Wells disappeared and now is that Don is no longer around, and he won't be for the next few months while he serves time in the slammer. Don's been in prison since February 2022, so Grandma is giving her much anticipated interview in March. Now that's almost a month after that. A month is about enough time for Grandma to, I guess, move back to Tennessee to reclaim her place back at Chalet Wells where she was living when all of this happened, to get comfortable and finally speak her mind. So now let's deal with microanalysis in terms of her statement. Now that we have the timing and context stuff out of the way, let's examine the 209-second, just under 3.5 minute clip. The first thing to note is that Grandma isn't being generous with her time. 209 seconds is providing a very brief, limited, clipped version of a story that all of Tennessee and much of America have been ruminating about for months. Even so, 209 seconds is ample time for us to not only do behavioral and body language analysis, but statement analysis as well. With the sound down, paying attention to Grandma's chest, one can clearly see Grandma is nervous and emotional. Her chest heaves up and down, even though, certainly at first, her face is frozen still. What's quite interesting with Grandma is, although there's not much emotion in her face, especially given the subject matter, you can see a lot of emotion in her body, and there are kind of flashes of emotion every now and then when she makes her statement. There's bobbing of the head, there's grimacing of the face as well. So although Grandma does become more animated later on, something else to bear in mind is throughout her 209 seconds on camera, she makes virtually no eye contact with the interviewer. What do you think that's about? You would think if you had nothing to hide and you wanted your granddaughter found, you would be more focused on appealing to your audience, on addressing your audience, on getting a rapport going between you and the interviewer, than on defensively being concerned what they thought of you. Does that make sense? Now we move on to microanalysis. It takes all of 43 seconds into the 209-second statement to actually say Summer's name for the first time. Nothing about Summer is mentioned in terms of her being a passenger, either heading away from home or returning home. It's simply Summer went swimming that day. And every time Summer is missing, pay attention to Grandma's appearance, her tone of voice, the way her body sort of seems to react in a kind of a nervous way. As I said, I'll put a link in the description so you can play that on your own time. Now, bear in mind, we have video of Grandma in the vehicle with Candus, as well as an unconscious Summer, and nothing is mentioned about that moment at all in this short interview. There's also clearly a lot of emotion around acknowledging and simply mentioning Summer. Grandma's chin pulls inward and downward the moment she mentioned Summer. As noted previously, Grandma can't seem to make eye contact at all as she relates this part of the story. There's also a long pause, a long breath after Grandma actually mentions Summer's name, and she adds, after a kind of a pause, an uncomfortable pause, at the horse stables, I believe it was. It's actually the Warrior Path Lake area, Warrior Path Park area. And then she says, and then we come back. Now, what's interesting with this so far is that it's just Summer who went swimming, really. No one else. There's also no acknowledgement of Macbeth, also no mention at all either of Candus, other than right at the beginning. In her story, Grandma keeps the narrative focused on herself, but what we're offered is superfluous information, not inflammation. We find out here that her knee was inflamed, and so she got a shot for it, and also pain medication. On the interview room, they also highlight the fact that this wasn't an appointment. This was something that seemed to spontaneously happen. You may recall that Candus, Grandma's daughter, telling Chris McDonough that Grandma was walking around the swimming hole picking flowers. Really? Do we believe that? Do we believe that Grandma was there? Because she doesn't really talk much about the swimming holes. And her saying, I believe it was at the horse stables. Well, wouldn't you know? Weren't you there? Now, after going to hospital with a painful knee and her running around, apparently, the muddy, uneven terrain picking flowers, I think that was Candus's version of events, her daughter's. There's no mention of this in her statement. Grandma spends all of 54 seconds, less than 1 minute, describing the events prior to, at the swimming hole, and subsequent, which is pretty impressive. She also doesn't mention dropping Macbeth off, or for that matter, picking him up. Now we deal with statement analysis. From 55 seconds onwards, we deal with Grandma's statement for the events that played out at Chalet Wells. Let's listen in.
After we brought my groceries in for me, and the boys helped with that, and of course Summer, and I laid down and went to sleep, and I got up and I was sitting in my doorway, and we come out, and Candus asked me what I was doing. I said, well, we got to transplant these little cactuses into bigger pots. And we did that, and then Summer come in and had a piece of peppermint, which is her favorite, and then she went in. She said, Mama, I want to go play with the boys. Candy walked her back to the house, and she asked the boys to keep an eye on her, and that's the last time I seen her.
So if we break that down, Grandma says, I went in my camper, and then she sort of digs her chin into her chest, and she says, after we brought my groceries in for me, and the boys helped with that, and of course Summer. This is only the second time Grandma directly references Summer, and is followed by a long, fraught, about 5 seconds of breathlessness. The interview room rightly emphasized what Grandma said next, immediately after this bland, indirect reference to Summer, highlighting it as highly dubious, where Grandma says, I lay down, went to sleep. And she seems to kind of make a strange sound at this point. I'm not sure if she's laughing or chuckling. Grandma then says, I got up and I was sitting in the doorway. And then she says, in, and pulls another face. So her saying that she slept in the middle of that afternoon, I think is quite interesting. She doesn't say how long she slept or what time she started sleeping. But one's got to cross-reference her sleeping with Candus's version, which seems to all take place in a matter of 2 or 5 minutes, based on how you interrogate what Candus said, and we'll deal with that in a minute. Anyway, Grandma says, we come out, and Candus asked me what I was doing. So obviously after she slept. And she says, well, we got to transplant these little cactuses into bigger pots, and we did that. Grandma says, and then Summer came in, had a piece of peppermint, which is her favorite, and this is the third reference to Summer. Does Grandma seem a little nervous and breathless each time she says her name? So the other thing that I think is quite interesting here is Grandma doesn't include Summer, in this transplanting of cactuses. she says, and we did that, and then she says, and then Summer came in and had a piece of peppermint. In other words, in her version of events, Candus Horror and her daughter Candice Bly do this transplanting, and then Summer came in. She doesn't expressly include Summer in this activity. Grandma goes on to say, then she went in. She said, Mom, I want to go play with the boys. Candy walked her back to the house, and she asked the boys to keep an eye on her. And here's a kind of a quick vibration of the head. That's the last time I've seen her. It's almost like a challenge to say, there's my statement, and it's almost shaking off nervous energy. And that's it. Don't ask me any more about it. At this point, at 1:47 in the video, Grandma makes eye contact once again with a reporter. But it's kind of one of the few times she actually does make eye contact. And in the context of not making eye contact and then making eye contact at the end, it seems somewhat confrontational. When the reporter asked Grandma to relate the first time Summer went missing, Grandma jerks slightly and there's an audible intake of breath. She closes both eyes for a moment. Finally, she opens her eyes and there's a sudden spark of anger. Yeah, she's almost glaring at the reporter. Grandma suddenly shoots back, knocking her head forwards as she almost spits out the words. She says, to be blunt, it was hell. And I don't really think that is what the reporter meant when she asked that question. I don't think the reporter meant this sort of general way of answering it, that, it was just a feeling of hell. She wants to know, what did she see? What kind of went on? Anyway, now we're at the 2-minute mark. I'm not going to deal with the remaining 89 seconds. Instead, let's cross-reference what Grandma has said here with Candus's version during the Sermon on the Mount. Candus said, me and my mother and her were planting flowers, meaning me and Grandma and Summer were planting flowers. There's already a difference here where Grandma talks about cactuses, Candus is talking about flowers. And then she says, and we went in after we got done washing our hands, and she got a piece of candy from Grandma, and she wanted to go back and see her brothers. And I said, okay. And I watched her all the way to the porch, and I watched her walking into the kitchen where the boys were watching TV. And I told the boys, I said, watch Summer, I'll be back. And within 2 minutes, I came back. And I asked the boys where their sister was. And she said, and they said, she went downstairs, Mom, to play with her toys in the playroom. I said, okay. And I yelled downstairs for a couple of times. And I didn't get no answer, which is unusual because usually she always answers me. And so I went down there to check, and she was nowhere in sight. She was just gone. And this is Candus's version to Chris McDonough a couple of weeks after the Sermon on the Mount. She said, I bring my kids out and we all unload the groceries. We all go in my house because we sort out my groceries from her groceries. We always do, and we did that. And Mom walked back across. And me and Summer, motioning to the water at this point, because they're having this interview at the swimming hole, she says, and me and Summer were putting groceries away and watching TV off and on and just chilling with the boys, hanging out. And then we decided to do some laundry because my kids, they got 8 pairs of pants, each of them. So like doing laundry at my house is like a lot. It's a job. Doing the laundry and stuff. Kids are sitting there watching TV. And I stepped down and noticed Mom was sitting on the step. And her step is literally from here to that tree from my doorstep. I can literally walk over and be right there. And she's like looking around and says, and so Candus says to her, what's your problem? We need to get these plants transplanted into bigger pots. She goes, well, we know the boys ain't going to help because they don't like to do flowers. I was like, but I know someone that will. So I ran back to the house and I grabbed Summer. I was sitting in the kitchen playing with a little, what are they? And then she says, and I was like, Summer, you want to plant flowers with me and Grandma? She jumped up faster than I've seen anyone jump up. She's like, pretty flowers. Yeah, let's go over to Grandma's transplant is all we did. And so we did that. And I don't know, it took us a while, probably 30 to 40 minutes. We're not real fast people. Summer, we got done, washed our hands. She asked Grandma for a piece of candy. She always does. And of course, Grandma gives it to her. And we were sitting there for, 5-10 minutes at the most. And she goes, Mom, I want to go back into the house with my brothers. I said, all right. So I got up and I walked across where I could literally see her walking into my doorstep. And she walked in there, and there's scaffolding, yellow and black scaffolding for steps. And I put my hand on the scaffolding and I said, boys, watch Summer. I'll be right back. I had to go over and help Mom. She was still sitting there, and I had to go and get her knee brace and fix it for her. It took me like 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. I don't know. I'm not a time person. And the next thing I know, I say, Mom, I'm going to go back to the kids to chill and hang out, whatever. And I friggin' asked her brothers, do you know where your sister go? She was just right here with you. She just wanted to play with her toys downstairs, Mom. That's where our room is. That's where her toys are. And after about a second, I didn't hear nothing down there. I'm like, are you sure she went downstairs? They're like, yeah, Mom, she went downstairs. And my boys do not lie to me. And I said, Summer, and she didn't answer me. And I said, Summer, are you down there? And she didn't answer me. And so I ran down the stairs pretty much. I was freaking out. Why is she not answering me? And I looked everywhere. I blew up. I went everywhere looking for her. I couldn't find her nowhere. So the main difference between Grandma's version and Candus's version is Grandma says nothing about Candus helping her fit her knee brace at the camper. This is apparently what Candus and Grandma are doing when Summer goes missing. This is important. Candus and Grandma, Summer's mother and her grandmother, are fitting her brace when Summer goes missing. And that doesn't seem to have been mentioned here by Grandma. Grandma says they were transplanting cactuses, whereas Candus says they were transplanting flowers. What's clear is both of them had their hands in soil or dirt right around the time Summer goes missing, and also that they wash up and do the laundry around the same time. Grandma's version is also that Summer goes inside the house to play with the boys, except she doesn't play with the boys. Instead, she goes downstairs and is out of sight. It's also interesting that Grandma doesn't mention Candus coming up to her or the boys and saying Summer's missing. In conclusion, in general, we can say there's the stiff, weak appearance of cooperation and caring from Summer's family. But when Grandma is asked how often she's been in contact with law enforcement, she puts the shoe on the other foot and says they can come and speak to her at any time. Really? 8 months missing, and Grandma's not calling law enforcement at all to find out how the search is going for her granddaughter, Summer Wells. So I'm not going to take it further than that. I will be continuing the Barry Morphew affidavit. I'll be continuing with that. I probably won't do the next one as a live stream. I'll just do a concise version just dealing specifically with the affidavit. And then I'll also be continuing with some more analysis in the Ukraine invasion. So look out for that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.